Communist countries have long been considered the laughingstock of the world. Well, that's as long as you define comedy as tragedy viewed from a distance. So, what does communism have to do with psychology? Well, maybe more than you might think, so bear with me on this one as I take you through a bit of a thought experiment. First, let's consider something that's kind of obvious. People who share similar beliefs to each other tend to form groups like churches, conservation groups, charities, communes, and political parties. The reason is because it's a lot easier to communicate and understand people who share similar beliefs to your own, while conversing with members of a cordial cult can be challenging unless you really like Kool-Aid. Now let's consider something that's a little less obvious. People who share similar patterns of thinking tend to share similar beliefs because it was predominantly how they did their thinking that brought them to those beliefs. Therefore, it would make sense if most libertarians and most communists and most conservatives had similar patterns of thought that helped them all reach the conclusion that libertarianism or communism, whatever, was actually right for them. Finally, psychologists, philosophers deal with patterns of thought, or as we more commonly call them, thinking habits. Because at the core of commonplace therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is the belief that people can change their thinking like they can change a bad habit like smoking or excessive drinking. In fact, any philosopher who believes in free will also believes people can change their thinking habits. Therefore, to the keen and observant psychologist, the thinking habits of people and their political leanings are going to be closely linked. This can be seen in people with depression, who believe any effort they make to improve their situation is ultimately pointless, as opposed to optimists who believe that any effort they make to improve their situation is worth it whatever happens. So we can say that the depressed person has a habit of thinking about all the things that could go wrong, while the optimistic person has a thinking habit of looking for all the things that could go well. As with all habits, any depressed person can train themselves to see better outcomes, and any optimistic person can train themselves to see more failure if they wanted to. And so we come to communism. And the recent situation with the coronavirus in China has allowed me to observe some very interesting parallels in the behaviors of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, and with the mental illness we call narcissism. Firstly, let's quickly go over some of the beliefs and thinking habits of people with narcissistic personality. Now, don't be surprised if you find different definitions and descriptions of narcissism. There's still a lot of debate in the psychological community about how to actually define narcissism. This list isn't to be considered an exhaustive list of all the traits associated with narcissism. Sources will vary. Anyway, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's continue. Number 1. Entitlement. Narcissists believe they are entitled to a certain standard of care and respect from others without having to earn it. Whether it be limitless money, sex, praise, and so on, all that matters is that they believe they are entitled to it regardless of their performance and contribution to the relationship or of the needs of others around them. 2. Narcissists have a belief in their innate superiority. Narcissists typically believe that they are better or more important than others. They will tell you this frequently in case you didn't notice how much smarter, quicker, stronger, and wealthier and more moral they are compared to other people. Sometimes they're overt about this, telling you straight up that they're better than you in some way, or more often they simply drop hints into every conversation. Only a genius could come up with a video like this and put it together. Narcissists have an insatiable need for attention and validation. Narcissists are always seeking attention and praise from other people. They can be crass and outright demand you compliment them in their latest makeover, or they can be cunning and use charm to draw people in to giving them precious narcissistic supply. You know, darlings, you are so lucky to have me here, selflessly making these videos for you. I just thought I'll just remind you of that. Be grateful for me. Anyway, narcissists need to control and micromanage everything. Narcissists can't trust other people. They think everyone else is incompetent. So they feel the need to pry and violate boundaries to pester and nag people, even spy on them to keep them under surveillance. This could mean reading your phone messages or looking over your shoulder at the office. What is she doing? Narcissists also lack responsibility. No matter how obvious it might be for you or anyone else, no mistake is ever the fault of the narcissist. They will not take responsibility for any blunder on their part. Sometimes even trivial things like dropping a spoon, they will ascribe to an external cause. Now look what you made me do. Lack of boundaries. Narcissists believe that boundaries like, that's my property and that's my privacy and that's my choice, needlessly get in the way of whatever the narcissist is doing and simply won't respect them unless you push back firmly against their intrusions into your personal space. In short, narcissists will claim personal boundaries are inefficient and will argue that their policy of violating other people's boundaries is just the most practical way to get things done. Narcissists have an inability to communicate or work with others as part of a team because they can't perceive other people as having feelings, needs, and interests of their own, and therefore they don't believe other people have value outside their utility to the narcissist. This lack of empathy makes working with narcissists extremely difficult, as they won't be responsive, flexible, or responsible. Instead, they'll advocate a strict top-down authoritarian leadership style. Paranoia. Never expect a narcissist to show any true vulnerability. Certainly they will cry and beg, but only if they think it will get them what they want. Never because they actually feel remorse for what they've done wrong. They'll cry at you because you snapped at them, not because they were just verbally abusing you for an hour before you snapped at them. Narcissists sincerely believe they are normal, healthy people, and so they also sincerely believe everyone else is a narcissist just like them. This is also called projection. Therefore, to show genuine vulnerability to a narcissist is perceived to be manipulative and controlling, never gentle-hearted innocence. This is why you will sometimes hear narcissists complaining bitterly about toddlers and pets plotting to undermine them with their crying and their yelping. The narcissist worldview is literally one of dog eat dog all the way down. They just don't believe you have an innocent reason for bugging them or a justified reason for bugging them. You are always plotting against them, and that's the paranoia of the narcissist. Gaslighting is a huge topic in relation to narcissism because the details of how it works are complicated, but suffice it to say for this video, narcissists are constantly rewriting the narrative of any interaction you have with them. Even if they've done something clearly wrong, they will rewrite that narrative to say that actually they're the hero and or the victim, either the hero or the victim. They're the two roles that narcissists tend to view themselves as, and no matter what you have done, they will try to convince you through the very selective interpretation of the facts of what actually happened that you are either an idiot or a malevolent manipulator. And you probably, most times you probably want to be thought as an idiot for your own safety, but if you do anything competent, they will just automatically put you into the manipulator category and say that the only reason why you're being competent was to undermine and embarrass them. And they're very good at gaslighting, manipulating with words to trick you into thinking, oh, maybe I am a manipulator. I'll do another video on this in the future because it's a fascinating topic. Splitting. Splitting is when a narcissist takes responsibility for every good thing they do, while simultaneously blaming you or others for everything bad they do. It's a thought process driven by the belief that they cannot make mistakes. Therefore, if mistakes are made, they must have been caused by someone else. Probably you. Narcissists are motivated by a deep repressed fear of ridicule. And this is partly because a narcissist, they make very poor decisions. The lack of empathy actually kind of curses them to always make really bad life decisions. And because they've made these really bad decisions, they've got a lot of face to save, because if the truth got out, they couldn't ignore the fact that they've been absolutely incompetent. And so the narcissist has a strategy of coping with this, and that's by escalating. So the closer they are to being exposed, the more paranoid, the more blaming, the more aggressive, the more selfish, the more gaslighting, the more reckless and irresponsible they become. And the simple reason for this is, if they don't escalate, then they're not narcissists, because then they go, oh yeah, I made a mistake, I got that wrong, I can do better next time. That's a healthy, humble, accepting way of looking at life, and that's how a healthy person thinks. Narcissists are pretty much defined by the fact they don't do that. They escalate instead. And that's how you can tell a narcissist, because as soon as you say, hey, you did that wrong, if you see that escalation, when all the facts say, no, yep, you made a mistake, then you know you're dealing with a narcissist. Alright, now let's go back through the same list again and see if the recent behavior of the Chinese Communist Party lines up with the qualities of narcissism. Entitlement. The CCP don't like patent laws and having to pay royalties for the fruit of other people's labours, so they steal other people's inventions and sell them as their own without paying the inventor. During the coronavirus outbreak, the CCP felt so entitled to the hard work of Gilead's researchers that they took the generous offer of help from the Americans and then tried to steal it from them to make money out of the catastrophe they created. If that wasn't entitled enough, the CCP also feel entitled to entire nations of people, like the Tibetans, the Mongolians, the Uyghurs, and members of the spiritual movement Falun Gong. They have taken their lands, their labour, their freedom, and even their organs as their entitlement, with no reasonable claim other than their belief in their superiority, which leads on to point 2. The CCP advocate communism as a superior economic system, but everywhere communism has been tried, it has completely failed to compete with the success and prosperity produced by capitalism. However, rather than admit they were wrong, they've adopted limited aspects of capitalism and merely pretend it isn't capitalism by calling it communism with Chinese characteristics, which to any sane person means they were wrong, they know they're wrong, but because they believe they're superior, they can't admit they were wrong. Insatiable need for attention and validation. China has been generously giving defective medical supplies to countries infected by the coronavirus, and by generously I mean they are making them pay 7 or more times the usual price for these medical supplies if they had been useful. They are merely calling it charity because they want the praise and attention for appearing to do the noble thing, when in fact countries like Taiwan, Germany, America and Russia have been far more generous in actually giving away genuine medical supplies, and their efforts aren't being reported because those countries aren't trying to get praise for doing the charitable thing, nor are they perhaps using these gifts for nefarious purposes. One psychologist actually wrote an article I will link to below about how a narcissist's gifts to you is really a gift to themselves. It's very controlling and self-serving, and definitely worth reading that. Considering the lavish but completely undeserved praise that the World Health Organization gave to China at the beginning of this pandemic, one has to wonder how much Dr. Tedros has been paid by the CCP and why the CCP wanted to be praised like this. Because it's not really the action of a responsible government concerned about protecting people's lives. Need for control. Narcissists are controlling, and in China, you can't access certain websites or even software without permission from the CCP. The Great Firewall of China, the silencing of citizen journalists, the responsible doctors like Dr. Li, and locking down the country to the point of even welding people into their apartments, all point to a very controlling political mindset. Lack of responsibility. As I pointed out earlier, Chinese products are generally substandard. And I'm not just talking about their medical supplies. In general, Chinese manufacturers produce poor quality products like baby formula. This is because the CCP forbids any accountability for wrongdoing. The only real crime in China is criticizing the CCP. It's like the only real crime with a narcissist is criticizing the narcissist. So long as you are willing to pay lip service to the party, they will not get on your case for being irresponsible in your workmanship. Even if it kills hundreds of babies or hundreds of thousands of elderly people, because they either didn't run the wet market to an appropriate hygiene standard, or they didn't run a research lab up to the correct safety standards. And that is a lack of responsibility of the Chinese Communist Party. Lack of boundaries. Your narcissistic boyfriend or girlfriend might read your phone messages, but the CCP will read every single chat you send, even in a private group, and actually arrest you and put you in one of these. Your narcissistic partner still wishes she could do this to you. Lack of empathy. Like I said before, if you lack empathy, it's impossible for you to work with other people because you'll always be undermining them. Like, it won't even be deliberate. You just don't know what they want, don't know what they need, you don't know how to talk to them, don't know how to communicate. All these things come from having empathy, which allows you to work well with a group. But if you lack empathy, you're just always going to be on the wrong page, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing with the wrong priorities. And what we have here with the with China and the World Health Organization, instead of using the WHO to work with other countries to cooperate cooperatively as a team, the CCP have been using it like a narcissist would to save face, to tell everyone how wonderful they are, to blame others, and seek praise. If they had empathy for the millions of non-Chinese suffering from the virus around the world, they would be accurately reporting their figures, sharing everything they know, as well as allowing foreign scientists to examine key areas within Wuhan. But without empathy, they can't cooperate with other people because they can't understand other people's needs accurately or their intentions accurately to gauge what their reactions would be. Narcissists think everyone's out to get them, but empaths correctly realize that most people want to help others and not blame them. This actually also covers point 8. The CCP are paranoid of the intentions of other countries, seeing malice where none actually exists. Sadly, if you keep treating people as though they have a malice towards you when they don't, sooner or later they will start to treat you with malice, and I think we're seeing that right now in the international community. Gaslighting. The CCP have been covering up the truth and telling a fictional account of the CCP virus situation with China, cast as both the victim and the hero, which is just what a narcissist would do, when in reality they are both perpetrator and perjurer. They are using their state-run media to push their false narrative of the virus originating overseas, blaming foreigners, claims that very few have died in China, claims that the virus is contained, and denials that the virus is the result of a gain-of-function experiments conducted at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. When all these things they can either be verified, like there's even scientific papers from the Wuhan Institute of Virology specifically about gain-of-function experiments, and they're perfectly reasonable questions to ask, but they contradict the narrative of the CCP being the hero and the victim, and so all media is censored in China, and they even have an army, the 50 Cent Army, who go onto social media and deliberately spread false information that encourages people to see the CCP and China as a victim or as a hero protecting the world from a virus they actually were instrumental in spreading, if not creating, in the first place. Splitting. When foreign countries close their borders with China, that's racist. But when China does it to other countries, that's caring for their people's safety. China says it's ludicrous that the virus is man-made, then accuses the US of creating it in a lab and planting it in China. The CCP encourages racism towards foreigners inside China while complaining endlessly about potential racism towards Chinese abroad. And to my knowledge, Chinese abroad still, they don't get kicked out of their apartments or their homes and forced to live on the street like these Africans in Macau were forced to do recently. So I just don't think there's actually that much racism out here. The CCP will tell you that Western colonial debt trap diplomacy is wrong, but China carries out debt trap diplomacy on a scale far beyond anything European colonial powers even attempted over a 400-year period. China encourages patriotic and nationalist sentiment in their population, but condemns any Europeans who wish to encourage patriotism in their countries. And I could keep going on and on with a list of things that are good for me but not for thee in regards to the CCP. And that classic example of splitting. Motivation by fear of ridicule. At this point, I feel I'm laboring the point if I have to once again go through examples of how the CCP obsessed with saving face rather than addressing the real problems. This behavior of seeing imaginary slights more serious than real material problems like a deadly pandemic or impending mass starvation on a global scale is typical of narcissism. In your personal life, a narcissist will destroy marriages, families, businesses, and friendships, and even their own opportunities to be happy in life, so long as they never have to admit that they're wrong. Likewise, a CCP would prefer millions of deaths, industrial collapse, mass poverty, mass starvation, civil war, and even global war, so long as they never have to admit that they're wrong. None of this is unique to the CCP. Every communist regime behaves in a surprisingly predictable way. I could have made this same presentation about the Soviet Union or about Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, or any Eastern Bloc country. The behavior of narcissists and communists is surprisingly similar and consistent over time, and the dogma, the philosophy of Karl Marx seems remarkably similar to what you'd expect from a narcissist writing about economics: intense loathing of anyone doing better than they are, entitlement to free stuff from others, and a theory of law that blames victims of crime while exempting the perpetrators of any wrongdoing. Communism owes its success to violence, betrayals, and elaborate confidence tricks played through the education system and the media. But like any narcissist, their castle of lies falls down like a house of cards once exposed. Such was the fate of the Soviet Union, and one day, maybe sooner than you think, it will happen to the CCP too. In fact, based on the parallels between narcissism and communism, I'm going to be so bold as to predict that the CCP will behave like any narcissist one might encounter, with escalations of more threats, more violence, more intimidation, with more spreading of rumors and lies against their proponents, increasing bullying and intimidation tactics, more insidious propaganda, misinformation, and false generosity. It wouldn't surprise me if they just started shooting protesters in the street again and threatening to bomb countries who question them. My question today for you to ponder is this: is communism a rational political philosophy, or is it the result of a herd of narcissistic people working together? Is communism a spectre created by inequality, or is it simply the logical result of a political institution of a country becoming infested with narcissists? And this is a serious question. Are the works of Marx and Engels merely an elaborate set of apologetics for organized narcissism? If anyone knows of any research papers about the link between narcissism and communism, please comment below and let me know about them, because I'd love to see some more research into the link between different political affiliations and mental health. Although I suspect that no self-respecting psychologist is ever going to do such research, because they ultimately are dependent on government grant money to pay their bills, and one generally doesn't publicly criticize one's employers. And let's face it, there's a lot of communists and communist sympathizers and narcissists working in the government. So why would you ever do research that would shed a light on the mental health problems of the people who pay your income? That's it for this video. As always, like, share, and subscribe if you felt this video deserved it. Take care, and until next time, per spera ad astra.